You know, we've all seen the videos of the prepubescent drag queens, right? The prepubescent boys who are acting like girls or think they're girls or want to be women or whatever the hell is going on, and often in a very sexualized way, extremely degenerate, extremely disturbing. You know, this is obviously child abuse. And the fact that these children and their parents are paraded around and virtue signaled over and fawned over, you know, rather than being, you know, the parents for sure punished, is the only thing that would happen to them in a sane and reasonable and just society. Because it's child abuse what they're doing to these kids. But, I mean, we've all seen that. We've all been disturbed by it. We've all been disgusted by it, which is right and proper. But we shouldn't lose sight of the bigger picture here. And this is really kind of a fringe and marginal phenomenon still. And it always will be, compared to what's really going on. And, you know, there's a couple of reasons why this isn't a huge thing to worry about. And one of those is that, you know, boys will be boys. You know, this kind of gender ideology is not really anything new. I mean, liberals have been retarded about this since forever. And my parents in the 80s were against gender roles and all that kind of stuff. And my brothers and I weren't allowed to have toy weapons. My parents gave that up pretty quick when they realized that everything can be a weapon. Okay, so boys will be boys. You can't really stop it. For the most part, they're going to figure out something sane. You know, for the most part, I mean, it can't be a good thing to have these influences on boys. It can't be good on that, but most of them are still going to figure it out. They're still going to arrive more or less where they need to be, we hope. But much more so than girls. Right? Seems like girls are a lot more malleable. They're a lot more suggestible. And they're a lot more, you know, subject to influence and pressure. And boys kind of have drives and tendencies and innate characteristics a lot more so than girls. Girls do too, to an extent, but it seems like they're more malleable. And so the sexualization and feminization of boys is going to be, I think, much more of a fringe phenomenon. And especially in the most extreme forms, much more of a fringe phenomenon. And, you know, something more like normalcy will tend to prevail. And the other thing is, you know, males are critical, and male roles are critical, but individually males are, let's say, more expendable. So, you know, as long as a few figure it out, that's enough. If your society has 1% of its males or 2% of its males, you know, as warriors, that's doing pretty okay. And if they have, you know, if 3% of your males as warriors, you know, you're doing great. So it doesn't need to be everyone, and even you need people who are going to be risk takers in other ways, or driven or motivated, or have other masculine qualities, competitive, etc. You need all of that. That's all critical. But the number of people you need doing that kind of stuff is actually fairly small in each necessary category. And you only really want the best and the most driven and the most motivated and the most aggressive, etc. And in most cases, those are the only ones who can win those positions anyway, because they're positions of status and, you know, maybe wealth and power and other things. So they're highly sought after and highly competitive, and only a few people can obtain those positions anyway. So as long as the most apt and the most suitable are obtaining those positions, you know, that stuff is still getting done. You know, I think in a way, a lot of this circus sideshow stuff this freak show stuff that really disgusts us and disturbs us. You know, where they parade around these little like over sexualized, effeminized freak shows and ooh and ah over them and all this other stuff. I think this distracts from the larger problem, which is, you know, what they've been teaching girls for decades about. Oh, well, you got to have an education. You got to go seek an education, or you're a failure. You got to develop a career, or you're going to be bored. And you know, discouraging women from adopting more feminine roles, discouraging women from adopting more traditional roles, and encouraging them into, you know, relatively more masculine ones. And it's more subtle in most cases. You know, it's not as flamboyant in most cases. And it's you know, it's something that's been around for a lot longer, but it's ultimately a lot more insidious and a lot more destructive. Because much more so, you need more women to fulfill traditional feminine roles. You need most women to fulfill traditional feminine roles. You know, if only a few men fulfill the traditional masculine roles, that'll probably still be enough. Right? Because a lot of those roles are pretty exclusive anyway. So if only a few men fill those roles, as long as somebody's still filling them, as long as it's more or less the most qualified, or close to the most qualified, then it's enough. And if the rest of the guys are just dicking around and doing stupid shit, you know, gay stuff, then it's not as big of a deal. I'm not saying it's not a big deal, but it's not as big of a deal versus much more moderate failures of women to live up to traditional feminine values and traditional feminine roles. And so, you know, in getting overly distracted by these disturbing, disgusting displays, these really exaggerated, really dramatic, really flamboyant displays of degeneracy and deviancy, you know, we're losing sight, I think, of the much less flamboyant and dramatic, but ultimately more insidious and destructive emphasis and indoctrination that's being given to girls to avoid traditional and feminine roles and to seek out relatively more masculine ones. Not as flamboyantly masculine. You know, nobody's thinking that these girls are going to become, you know, star male athletes or anything like that, or like male models, or, you know, it's not as flamboyantly or like elite. Nobody seriously thinks they're going to become elite special forces warriors. You know, so they're not going to be as flamboyantly masculine as these little tranny boys are flamboyantly effeminate. They're not going to be. It's not going to be as dramatic, but it's the same gradual erosion of feminine roles and feminine responsibilities that's been going on for 50 years. You know, this dramatic stuff, if anything, just kind of distracts from the real destructiveness of that and insidiousness of that. And so don't lose sight of, I don't want to say don't be disgusted or disturbed by the really degenerate stuff, the really dramatic deviancy, but don't lose sight of the really destructive stuff that's been going on in the background for 50 years and continues to go on. And that's the stuff that's really, you know, depressing our birth rates and really making our societies dysfunctional and stagnant and even regressive in a lot of ways, whether that's dysphonia or whether it's economic stagnation or, you know, whatever the case may be. That's the stuff that's doing the real damage. So let's not lose sight of that.